Dr. Trexler.
Dr. Helms.
No, hold on. Last time I just said Trexler. Or did I say Dr. Trexler?
You often disrespect me, so you probably just said Trexler or something worse.
Gotcha. Sorry, what did you say? I wasn't listening.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, so we're almost getting this intro right, because last time I think I just said Trexler and you just said Helms, which, by the way, not that I was listening, but it's not like you took the high road there. I thought you were enlightened and said Trexler, Dr. Helms. You just matched me, indicating that what I did was acceptable. So that's kind of passive aggressive.
I hold up a mirror. Behave how you wish.
Okay, now you are back to being pretty enlightened. I see what you did there. Man. You know, I didn't feel like you're like, it's almost like you're like a competitive Buddhist, like you're winning somehow, and somehow rubbing my nose in it by being enlightened.
That's what I'm in it for.
Well, you know,
to make people feel bad.
But they don't know it, and then they have to blame themselves, and then you say it's holding up a mirror, and you've done it again. I'm impressed. I'm actually impressed. I'm not even mad, Eric.
Yeah, glad to hear it.
So, this is our third installment of interviewing some of the most impressive champs from this year's WNBF Worlds, which I had the privilege of competing in. For those who've been listening, we've had, I think we know which order things are going to come out, so I'm relatively confident that by the time you hear this episode, you will have listened to our interview with Dirk Emmerich as well as Natalie Hayes. Today we have Beccy Pateman joining us on Iron Culture, who is, I will say that she is the WNBF Fit Body Pro World Champion, but that's not the only championship she won this year, which is part of the reason why we want to interview her. It was also her WNBF Pro debut, and I actually got to see her compete in WNBF Australia back in October. So incredibly impressive athlete, and I think off camera she mentioned that this is probably her most successful season. And I mean, it should be when you win multiple world championships. May not be her most successful season ever, because I see a bright future for her. But today we're going to be talking to her about how she got here, who she is, and really just trying to get some more insights into the world of natural bodybuilding, which is, man, Eric, it seems like it's on the rise.
It sure does. Yeah, I'm glad that I collected my trophies and got out of there because much like powerlifting, things have changed since the last time I competed.
Yeah, you know, that's a funny thing. And as we have this awesome interview and that we want to dive right into it and not delay it at all, I'm going to do what you would expect and start talking about myself and delay it a little bit. So, you know, in powerlifting, the way I used to gauge whether I'm improving relative to the same rate of the field was the Arnold qualifier back in the day. It used to be an open invitation to anyone who had a certain level of relative strength based upon what was their Wilks score. That's obviously changed over time. We have different relative strength scores. But it's easy to tell when you're improving, right? Especially in powerlifting. Am I stronger than last time? And I was consistently getting stronger, Eric, over the years. And I remember there was a time, and this is going to make it sound crazy to anyone who's only been involved in powerlifting in the last, say, 5 or 10 years, where if you wanted to enter the Arnold in powerlifting, you needed a 375 Wilks, which these days, if you go on the internet, makes it seem like maybe you're 6 years old, if that's your strength level. So I was just about to hit a 375 Wilks, and then that next year, I hit like a 390-ish Wilks, and then they changed it to a 400 Wilks to enter. And I was like, that's okay, I'm right there. And then I started working my way, like I said, I hit 390, towards a 400 Wilks. And next year, 435. And I'm like, okay, this is not even a linear increase. Now this is exponential. And today there's just absolutely no chance. So I have been on, a relatively good trajectory with my own personal powerlifting. But powerlifting as a sport has been almost straight up, if anyone saw that air figure following us on YouTube. However, my plucky stick-to-itiveness has actually kept me in the game with bodybuilding, and I had a relatively successful season, which probably tells me where I should stay. So it's pretty cool to actually not just be observing or coaching like I am in the powerlifting boom, because when I say I've gone to Worlds and we're talking about the IPF, there's a solid 99.9% chance that all the universes that are out there, I'm doing that as a coach, not an athlete. Or maybe it's Masters Worlds, or maybe I qualified for New Zealand and placed like 34th. I think those are the only opportunities for me. So, but yeah, actually getting to sit, like pump up and watch and all these crazy people around me and going, wow, has been quite the treat. So first off, let me just say, that's neat. And Beccy, champ, welcome to Iron Culture.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, Beccy, if you don't mind, in your own words, I said worlds because that's where we were recently. Tell us a little bit about yourself as both a person and a bodybuilder. Give us the old intro to the Iron Culture listeners.
Okay. See, this is where I could ramble a little bit. So a little bit about myself. I'm quite a shy, reserved kind of person. And I think I always have been ever since I was a child. And I think that's kind of where I am as well with my bodybuilding. So people often say to me, like, how do you do that? People who know me well enough to know that I'm quite a shy person. Like, how do you get up there and do what you do? And it is actually because I am a shy person that I'm able to do that. And that sounds really strange, but I think it's because I like to kind of focus on myself. And I think, like, I like to set myself challenges to get me out of my comfort zone, to grow as a person. They're my little goals for myself. So I guess that's a little bit about who I am. I'm not necessarily just a shy person, but it's a lot of who I am, yes.
No, I think that's a perfect introduction because to people not involved in the sport of bodybuilding, I think there are often stereotypes that they will put on bodybuilders or physique athletes generally, or people in the fitness space now that it's become bigger. I mean, the old trope used to be like, big dumb bodybuilder. And I think that is probably not completely died. I mean, obviously, if you look at the commercial for some gyms that will not be named because I don't want to give them shine, I pick things up and put them down. By the way, shame on that bodybuilder who represented us that way. It was not worth the paycheck you got. But anyway, I think I think breaking those stereotypes is still important because most people assume that if you're competing in physique sport, getting basically on stage in swimwear at best, if not near nude in my division, then people just assume you're an exhibitionist or you're doing it because you crave attention. And I've often tried to explain that for many people, it's not the pursuit of being aesthetic and just looking good and being able to have an Instagram with a lot of followers on it. It's more of an ascetic lifestyle, like kind of a monk-like existence in many ways, where you get to refine a certain level of self-discipline and work on yourself. I like the way you phrased that. And I think many people would be shocked at how many physique athletes don't have much of a presence on social media. And most of the ones who do work in the fitness industry and kind of have to. It's not just necessarily another place for them to constantly share stage photos. And that there is obviously some overlap between like the Fitspo, the dude who always has his shirt off, or the chick who you're always seeing half her face because she's looking over her shoulder back at you while she's showing her glutes. Like those people do cross over, but a lot of them aren't necessarily competitors, or when they do compete, it's more of a promotional tool rather than being what I would describe as physique athletes first. So I think that's really insightful, and I think it's a nice way to kind of crack open a little insight into who you are. So yeah, so thank you for that. And how long have you been in competitive physique sport?
Yeah. Okay. So my first bodybuilding show was back in 2017. It was Muscle Mania in the Gold Coast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I actually won, I won the physique title there for that first show. So that was a great way to kind of kickstart my passion for bodybuilding.
Uh-huh. So what drove you to decide to actually get on stage in that first season? What was the thing that moved you from all the other things you could do in fitness to, hey, I'm going to get judged by strangers and tell me how good I look?
Yeah, that's a bit of a story. I mean, briefly, I'll say that I think I need to tell the background story of this.
Floor is yours.
So when I was younger, I was always into sport. I have, a lot of brothers, and we were all into sport when we were younger. So I used to play soccer and athletics. During school, I actually got bullied quite a lot for my physique. All of my friends, like all of my, the girls in my class were quite petite and small. And I was always the more sporty, broader girl who was into the sports like soccer and things like that. So I guess you could say I was a little bit of a tomboy when I was younger. And I was definitely bullied for that. So when I got to high school, I stopped playing all of the sports because in my mind, I thought that women were supposed to be more curvy. And that's kind of, I guess, what was more socially accepted in my mind. That's kind of how I saw things. So I genuinely didn't like the way that I looked, which is kind of sad. Like I wish I could go back and, I wish I had a bit more insight when I was younger and didn't really let the noise get to me as much. However, so I stopped doing all of the sport and I didn't know too much about nutrition. So I ended up going quite the opposite way and gaining a lot of weight. So my whole fitness journey started out as basically a weight loss journey where I started to lose a little bit of weight. And then that kind of took a dive in a pretty deep, dark, opposite area where I was, doing my own research about nutrition, not understanding how scary it can be when you get it wrong. And I was severely undereating, severely over-exercising. And I ended up losing too much weight too fast and getting a lot of terrible side effects from that. So I guess I was going through my own sort of learning phase about nutrition and health and fitness for quite a few years before bodybuilding even, I even thought about bodybuilding. It was more just, I guess it came from a bit more of a sad sort of background because it was more me trying to lose as much weight as I could and fit in and, which I think a lot of young women unfortunately go through that. And I'm quite open with people talking about this because, I do hope that someone can hear that, you can go through that and you can come out the other side. So it took me a lot of years to do this, but I did come back from that. And my brothers actually, they're all into health and fitness, like I said, and they actually wrote me up a home program just with, a couple of dumbbells. And then once I worked up the confidence, they took me to the gym and I fell in love with it. And then I actually started, getting on YouTube and social media and looking up people who had a similar body type to me and who embraced it. And one of the women that I was following for a while was Stephanie Sanzo, who was, quite a strong lady who embraced it, who was still like very feminine. And then that kind of just kept evolving and I started really embracing my genetics. I started lifting, I started doing things that felt good for me. And then I went and saw my brother compete in a bodybuilding competition. And I was completely blown away by what I saw. It was almost like an instant passion, an instant, this is what I want to do. I can see myself doing that. And then one day I met someone called Brad Clark, and he was here at the local gym. He had competed before and won titles. And he looked at me and said, I think you have potential. And he kind of took me under his wing and he helped coach me and mentor me for the first 3 years of my bodybuilding. So he's the person who coached me through to my first show that I won. And I guess, that's how it all started.
I love it. I love that. Obviously I love where that story ended up. I'm sure none of us here love that it had to begin in a way where it eventually ended with self-acceptance and embracing that, which is, I think, awesome. And then getting rewarded by some success by doing that, which I think is always a good thing when that happens. Give us a timeline a bit. So what were the years on where this kind of journey went from, I'm trying just to go through a weight loss. I gained weight because of this way I felt about myself. I went through this weight loss journey. It got quite negative, and then it became positive. Got helped by my brothers first, and then you said Brad Clark was his name?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. What timeline are we looking at for all this?
So I was probably about 15 when I started doing home workouts. I was also homeschooled, by the way, from year 9 through to year 12 because of social anxiety. So that's how shy I actually was.
Right.
So I actually started my weight loss journey at home. So that was back when I was about 15 or so. And then when I was, I think I would have been like 19, I think, when I did my first show.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
So you're 25 now? Is my math right?
28. Sorry.
Not even close.
Incorrect.
Yeah.
That was my own timeline.
Got it.
Yeah. So yeah, it was quite a few years anyway. So I went through that period there, and I guess I did a lot of my own. I've gone through a lot, so I've done a lot of my own sort of. How could you say it? I've tested a lot of things myself. I've gained weight. I've lost weight. I've gained muscle. I've been through the emotional roller coaster of doing all of that. Which I think I'm extremely proud of. To say that I've been able to go through that, and to be able to make it through, and to now sit comfortably and say that I'm proud of the physique that I have, and that's huge. And I can say that I'm super proud of myself for being able to get to where I am today.
I love it. I think that's fantastic, and I love that you could acknowledge the. At least for me, I find that some of the things I've gone through, when I can acknowledge the double-edged sword nature of them, like, yeah, this is really shitty that this happened, but it also made me a stronger person. Those, I guess, lessons of resilience and integration and my ability to change, they, for me, allow me to know that I can face things in the future that might be quite devastating, but that I will be okay and maybe even better for it. And I think that gives me personally a little bit less anxiety moving into other parts or phases of my life. So I think that's super inspiring. I don't think most people, when they see someone on stage winning a world title, think, you know what, I bet they have extreme social anxiety or used to, and they're quite introverted, and they've really struggled with their weight and their self-image for years and most of their upbringing. Yeah.
And I will just also say that I don't know if this is going to be a question, and I might just be jumping ahead. But that one of the things that I love the most about competing is when I'm inspiring other people. And so this season, actually, I had a lady, I can't remember what show it was at. It might have been ICM Queensland that I competed at. Anyway, I had a lady come up to me and say, complimenting me on my physique. And she said, you've just inspired my daughter. Like my little girl saw you on stage and she said, wow, I want to look like her. I want to go to the gym. And that kind of just like, that just feels, that's better than any gold medal. Like for me, that's one of the best things that can come of my success.
Right. I don't know about you, but I feel like I owe a lot to the sport of bodybuilding. I have a sense of gratitude for the things that I've gotten out of it. It's quite uniquely helped me process like grief of losing my father, which I never expected when I got into it. So to get that, anytime I am able to, pay it forward, I feel the same way. I find that very, very fulfilling. And I think it's quite a unique thing that I didn't expect when I first got into competitive bodybuilding. Like, oh, this will be cool. So no, that's really cool. And I think that's something that a lot of people, again, with the stereotype of, us, serial narcissists, the three of us, because we compete in physique sport, you perhaps breaks the mold just a little bit. I'm only like 97% narcissist. So I just want people to see that 3% of me. I don't know about you, Trex.
I'm about 90, 95, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely less than me. I don't know how much a narcissist you are, but it's always less than me. That's one thing I'm definitely sure of.
Yes, definitely.
Beccy, so you mentioned ICN Queensland, and you were like, man, I don't remember which show. And that's because, was it fair to say you've done a few shows this season?
Yeah, I did 6 shows. I competed in 6 shows this season, so a big one for me.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's not as many as Natalie Hayes did, but I think she did more shows than any other person on the planet did in one season.
She was like remembering, oh yeah, and then I did another one the week after. It was crazy.
Yeah, and then she had to at the end be like, oh, by the way, I also did do the Olympia. We didn't mention that because it's the one natural show I didn't win, gold at. And I was like, I think that's 10. And she's like, I honestly don't know. I'm like, wow, okay. So yeah, I did 5 shows and I thought I was doing good, and she doubled it, and you got. Now that said, I would have loved to have only done 3 shows, but it just didn't work out that way, But I would say yours worked out. So can you walk us through the competitive season for you, and how how the results went? Because it was let's just say it'll speak for itself once you start going through it.
Sure. Okay. I actually had to jot them down, even though I only did 6, but I've got them here. So I started out, I did the Coffs Harbour Classic. So that's the ICN show in Coffs Harbour, which is a pretty local show for me. And then that was on the 16th of September. So that was my first show. And I entered in the figure and the Miss Classic figure, which, I mean, physique or fit body, Miss Classic figure, they're all quite similar. So, Miss figure in ICN is kind of like the physique or the fit body. And then the Miss Classic figure is more symmetry. I just thought I'd outline that.
Actually, it's good that we go over this very briefly because we have a mixture of international and American audiences. And so real briefly, the scene in Australia, now that I've been in New Zealand for, over 11 years now, it is a little different. Figure is not typically the figure that we're used to in the States necessarily. And I would say Australia is like a slightly smaller version of the US in terms of there being a lot of natural organizations, but not quite as many as we have. It's almost like your guys' obesity rates. Like you're up there, but you still got some work to do before you get to US status.
Good luck. Keep working.
Yeah. So you guys have got INBA like we do, but you also have, I believe, ABA, ANB, ICN, which is probably the biggest natural organization, would you say, right now in Australasia?
Yeah, more than likely, yeah.
Yeah, they've got really big turnouts, and they have, and I don't say this to disparage the ICN, but they have a lot of divisions on both the men's and women's side. There's so many divisions on the men's side, Eric, and some of them are so similar, you would have to actually look at the caption to know. So there's like 3 different versions of the board shorts, and there's classic and there's bodybuilding. Yeah.
A lot, yeah.
It's kind of like this weird blend from like men's physique to classic and then into bodybuilding. And then the way they do classic is different from, say, the way the IFBB does classic. And then it gets even more muddy now that the IFBB also does some drug-tested shows in and around the world. They're kind of looking over the aisle, and we need to be careful with that. We don't get our act together as a natural bodybuilding community, and generally we're going to look up one day and the biggest natural bodybuilding federation is going to be the IFBB. So just let's do better, guys. Just want to put that out there. So anyway, little bit of a difference there. So definitely, I appreciate you contextualizing which divisions you're in, because American listeners will definitely not get the right conception if you don't.
Yeah. So yes. So I entered into both the Miss Classic figure, so the symmetry, and then the Miss figure, which is more of the physique sort of category. And I actually won both of those overall classes, which was pretty awesome. That started off the season pretty well. Now, that show for me wasn't necessarily planned. It was kind of like a warm-up show because of the nerves. It had been a little while since I competed. So yeah, just wanted to get up there and have a feel for it, which was great. I had a lot of fun.
When was your last season prior to 2023?
When was it? 2021.
2021. Okay.
Yeah. Which was that I only did the one show. It was my return from COVID. And I also had an injury that year. So it was not the best time for me. So I was really looking forward to getting back up on stage and doing well.
So 2023 is the redemption arc for you by far. Okay, I love it.
You could say that, yeah.
Absolutely. Real briefly, ICN, was this a pro qualifier or was this like a regional that then qualifies for nationals, only nationals? Can you get your ICN pro card? What is the competitive structure like in the ICN?
I believe that's correct, what you've just mentioned there. Yeah. I could be wrong, but I think that's kind of how it goes.
Gotcha. Well, did you turn ICN pro at that show?
No.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Then I think I am right. So there we go.
Yeah. So then I did the ICN Queensland State Championships. And that was on the 23rd of September. So all of these shows were quite close together as well.
Right.
And for that, I competed again in both categories. And for the Miss Classic figure, I placed first overall. Again, that was the kind of like the symmetry. And for Miss Figure, I placed, I think, fifth.
Really?
I think it was last.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which, I mean, not that I wasn't shocked. I was probably a little shocked that it was like last place. I was thinking like, considering I had just won the figure, maybe I'd be in the top sort of 3, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit taken back, but at the same time, the quality of competitors was amazing. So, is what it is. So that was that one.
Would you say you were in your peak shape at this point, September 23rd?
No, I definitely wasn't. So my aim was the Olympia, Natural Olympia.
Gotcha.
And I think that's why previously I mentioned that was probably, I don't know if this was whether we were recording or not, but I said it was probably one of the best shows that I won. And I think it's because I had that in my vision for such a long time.
Right.
That was the show that I was aiming for and I couldn't wait to get there. So anyway, that was the end, the peaking show. Yeah.
Gotcha. So the main target was the INBA, PNBA, Natural Olympia. And in a prior year, you had turned pro in the INBA, getting your PNBA pro card. Is that accurate?
That's right. Back in 2019.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So you'd absolutely had some measure of success up to this point. This isn't a complete like, oh my God, blowout coming out of nowhere story. But I think as we see, this is definitely pretty monumental year. So okay, I'll stop interrupting you. I think we framed it up. Carry on.
That's okay. Yes, and then I did the INBA Team Australia show. And so this was like qualifier for the Natural Olympia in Vegas. And I placed first in the professional figure category, which again, that for me was like unreal. Like that was definitely another goal of mine, was to try and place first in a professional category. So I was blown away by that. Super happy. And then I competed at the WNBF Brisbane show, which you also competed at, Harry.
Yeah, it was a great show. I have to say, I was blown away by how well it was ran for the inaugural one put on by that group. There, just for the listener, there has been a WNBF Australia affiliate previously, but there was then a kind of a period where they were trying to make that work, and the affiliate changed a couple times. So this is like you could say this is like the Marvel reboot of the WNBF Australia. So it's like the inaugural new generation of WNBF Australia. So anyway, but I won't put my coloring on that experience or that show. How was that show for you? And was it planned, or was it something that you were like, let's jump in there as well, since you were targeting the Olympia?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I will say absolutely. The show was amazing. I was very, very impressed with how it was run. And even like the stage lighting, it was an awesome experience. And yeah, again, this was kind of not really planned. It was just a throw-in show. I wanted to get the experience of a different federation. And I'm so grateful I did that, because I wouldn't have known how great WNBF was. And yeah, I'm glad I was there to experience that show, because it was phenomenal.
Yeah. On that note, people may not realize this because of how common it is in the States. I was mentioning how there are some differences, but polygraph and urine-tested natural bodybuilding has pretty much not been a thing in Australia for a long time. And I noticed that, I swear I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody, but just to give an idea of how this is kind of a novel thing in the Oceania region, we had a substantial number of people drop out of both WNBF New Zealand and Australia last minute once the full breadth and depth of the banned substance list, the time, and the reality that, yes, everyone is going to be polygraphed. This isn't a proportion of randomly selected people only getting urine tested, supposedly. And I believe, and don't quote me, but Sebastian, if I get this wrong, definitely send me an angry DM. But there was over 100 people registered for WNBF Australia and over 50 registered. And Simon, you can also message me if I get this wrong, for WNBF New Zealand. And the final numbers were closer to like 40 and 90 in New Zealand and Australia, respectively. So that's a surprising number of people who did opt out last minute suspiciously after the polygraph information happened. And I will say that many of them do compete in other natural federations. And the final nice thing I will say is that this doesn't necessarily mean that that they're not natural. It's just that different organizations do have different drug-free periods, different banned substance lists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Becky, what would you say kind of the general vibe and culture of natural bodybuilding in Australia? Is the polygraph thing like a new, oh wow, this is how does that feel? You know, just because it's always been that way in the States since I've been involved since the 90s, but I know it's a relatively new addition to the Australian scene.
Yeah, well, I was even shocked by that. Like a polygraph. Wow, that's crazy. However, like it is so exciting. Knowing that that's happening is like, it's kind of like, I don't know, I just knew that I wanted to support that. For natural bodybuilding, I think it's super important that people have that opportunity to have an even playing field. You know, like I'm not saying, you know, again, like I'm not throwing shade on people who want to be enhanced. That's fine. But I guess my opinion on this is there are different federations that choose not to test. And I just feel like natural bodybuilders should have the freedom to be able to compete knowing that they've got an even playing field.
Yep.
You know, that's kind of my take on that. So the fact that I knew I was getting tested, you know, urine tested and polygraphed, I was like, yes, absolutely, I'm there. Like I wanted to be a part of that.
Love it. Eric, any thoughts on that one?
I've got nothing to hide. I'll take a polygraph anytime.
That's right. And that is another benefit to us being sociopaths is...
Yeah, it doesn't really work on us.
Yeah, competitive advantage right there, you know?
Yeah, no, it is interesting though, because like the federation that I turned pro in, they actually went the other direction and they basically said, we are not doing polygraph anymore, but we're going to ramp up our urine testing and try to do more, you know, to the extent that it's possible, try to do more off-season testing that's a bit of a surprise and test, you know, instead of doing like the top 3 get tested, you know, more of the competitors getting tested. So, yeah, it's interesting to see different federations have different takes on that. And that was actually a change that they made after, because the last time I competed was 2017. They actually made that change within the last few years. So I haven't really seen how it works in practice. But yeah, it's natural bodybuilding. There's always a lively debate on how do we make sure that natural competitors have an opportunity to compete on a level playing field and not have to, you know, make all sorts of sacrifices in order to have fun and be competitive in this sport. So always a good debate surrounding that stuff. But it's nice that it's nice to have a variety of federations that put it all out there above board and say, hey, if you want to meet these criteria, come get it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one. I've had I would say the privilege of competing in a lot of different federations, and also having been in the U.S. Air Force and had an espionage level certified U.S. Department of Defense polygraph, and there are absolutely differences. I've had over an hour long ones to make sure I'm not selling secrets to Russians or Chinese, probably more relevant these days. Maybe not. But back then it was
There's a bustling market for all your secrets, Helms. You can go all over.
Yeah, it's a good point. I just need to make a social media page. I'm sure that won't get me in trouble. And then I've had like literal 8-minute polygraphs in natural bodybuilding that I'm like, okay, this is just a deterrent at best. And then I actually have had legitimate 20, 30-minute polygraphs, which I thought were appropriately length because they don't have as many questions as when they're trying to ascertain if you're selling secrets to foreign governments. And the WNBF fortunately has been the one where that's been a very lengthy and involved process, as it should be. But yeah, it's not like you can't get a false positive on the polygraph. There's a reason it's not accepted into most courts and in law, but at the same time, it's not a useless tool if you look at some of the data. And there are certified polygraphers and organizations that are not. And you could say what you will. I think probably in a perfect world, natural bodybuilding would have so much money. And that's not even that high of a bar I'll put out there, where like the IPF in each country, they could have a registered off-season testing pool and you're getting random urinalysis at different times. I think that is probably the future if we can get there. It is challenging. It's a difference between being a private-owned business that is running natural bodybuilding events and acts as a sport organization versus the national sporting body for a given recognized sports that is connected to, say, World Games or the Olympics, that has like this IOC pool and testing and all that. So probably a long road, but I think for now, my personal stance is that high quality polygraph to get on stage, and then to the degree which the federations can afford it, urine testing of at least winners on the day, and then ideally some off-season testing. And when you see an organization do that, they are truly ticking every box that they can at this time. It's an encouraging thing. So I feel the same way, Beccy.
Yeah, and I think the reason the federation that I got my pro card in, the reason that they made the switch, which I think kind of speaks to what you're getting at, is I believe they mentioned that they kind of looked at the landscape of natural bodybuilding and they're like, we're getting a lot more people failing urine tests than we are polygraphs. So they decided, let's put our money on the urine testing and go all in on that. Because, when you see someone pass the polygraph and go fail the urine test, they didn't forget. They beat it, right? But like
sometimes the polygrapher doesn't do a very good job. It doesn't actually make you read over the banned substance list before you even take the polygraph.
Oh, yeah, that could do it. But Helms, I was going to say, like you're saying, with these polygraph tests, a lot of times it does come down to how it's administered. I mean, it's not kind of a, out of the can, every polygraph you do is the same thing. I mean, it really matters. The process can differ a lot, the duration of the test, the quality of the questions, and then, of course, finally, the interpretation of the actual results, which it's interpretation on the fly in real time, which is seems kind of tricky, but yeah.
Well, we could have a whole discussion on that one. We're not, because we're here for you, Beccy. But anyway, so yeah, it's a pleasant surprise when your region, kind of the landscape of natural bodybuilding changes like that, and competition comes in, because it forces other shows and other organizations to go, oh, are we doing a good enough job? So I think as much as I get frustrated with the fact that there are 600 natural bodybuilding organizations, I think when you do have some competition, it can drive up the quality overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of set that standard.
So WNBF Australia, you take your polygraph. Like us, you're a sociopath. You beat it, so you go on to compete.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. And then first time competing with WNBF, unreal show. And I placed first overall in both figure and fit body, and was awarded my pro card in both. That just sounds crazy even saying that. Yeah, considering it was a show that I wasn't really even thinking about, and I was just doing it for experience and a bit of fun. Yeah, crazy.
Incredible job. Yeah, and you presented fantastically. I was very impressed. It was awesome. So,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah, and then after that, it was on to, I think that was the last one I did here in Australia. So then it was on to the Natural Olympia in Vegas.
Yes.
Which was, for me, kind of the end goal, really. But for obviously doing so well in WNBF, I decided definitely while I'm over there, we'll do Worlds. That was definitely a last minute kind of decision. So Coach Joey Cantlin, shout out to him. He definitely kind of encouraged me to do that show, and I'm so grateful he did that. It was, changing flights and everything last second, but I'm super happy I did that. So anyway, went over to Vegas and competed in the Natural Olympia, which they have like a full event for the Natural Olympia, run over three or 4 days, which is always fun. I did compete in the Natural Olympia back in 2019, which again, for me, this was kind of like, I wanted to come back and do better than last time. So the last time I competed at the Natural Olympia, I believe I placed 6th out of a lineup of, I think, around 20 odd competitors. So I was super impressed with that. Just turned pro that season back in 2019, and then to go over there and place 6th out of a lineup of 20 women. I kind of just, that gave me a bit of drive, a fire in my belly to get back to Australia and work really hard and make it back there and just place in the top 5 so that I could do my T-walk.
Yes.
It's all I wanted.
So that was a 6th place finish last time in 2019 in the figure division?
That's right. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I just missed out on doing my T-walk. And for me, I was pretty devastated because you want that extra time on stage, just, spend all the time getting over there. And so I was pretty, obviously it was amazing, great experience, met a lot of incredible competitors. However, yeah, I just fell short of being able to do that. So this time that was the goal, just crack the top 5. And I ended up actually placing 1st overall in the professional figure category, which was just, I don't know if anyone has seen the video of me placing 1st, but that was just so overwhelming. I just burst into tears, basically. It was a long time coming. So yeah.
I resemble that. No, I get it completely. So yeah, it's a monumentous outcome. And did you just compete in the figure at the Natural Olympia?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
And that was, I guess for me, that was kind of more of a financial thing. I had to kind of really play my cards right so that I could fit it all in.
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, for people who don't know, it is not cheap to fly from New Zealand or Australia to the States,
I was just thinking of that,
the currency.
Yeah, the currency conversion, the amount of money that it costs. And the prize money in natural bodybuilding, folks, it's getting better, but you're basically looking at being a world champion to break even on a vacation to the States.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the last couple of folks we've talked to, they help me re-understand how I am just not about this life and not nearly intense enough. Because for me, most of the competitions I've ever done have been within 2 hours of my home by car. And the furthest I've ever gone when I technically left the state was 10 minutes from my parents' house. So I drove down to visit them and stayed there. So you folks are on a different tier, very, very, very different tier. Admirable, flying back and forth from Australia, New Zealand to the States. It's crazy in a good way.
Yeah, it's a commitment, and it can be difficult to manage it all for sure. It's a little bit more added anxiety. So Becky, you've competed and been very successful across 2 divisions all the way up to this point. Which one do you like more, figure or I'll say figure or fit body, but I think people can understand that's like physique. It's heels with some posing and muscularity shots, or heels with just symmetry around. I think that's the way to look at the archetype of figure and physique, even though they do carry different names on different federations.
Well, I do love them both. It's a hard decision there. And I'm so grateful that I have the physique to be able to kind of switch between the two at the moment. The reason why I love figure is I love symmetry.
Right.
I love that shape of the big shoulders, the little waist, the big quads. I love quarter turns because you can see that beautiful shape. I also love the fact that it's quite elegant and feminine as well. However, I love to be able to pose and flex my muscles. I have worked so hard for them. I definitely love the more muscular poses. And I do know that with INBA, you can do routines to music with the physique or fit body sort of category, which is also pretty awesome. So it's super hard for me to pick which one. I'm just going to leave it at that. I can't decide.
Well, you don't have to. You're doing pretty well in both. As people will find out, this success continues in both divisions. So you're Miss Natural Olympia in the figure category now. You've got your WNBF Pro card in both. Did you get your ICN Pro card by winning the regional title?
No.
Now you had to do nationals. Okay, so we're short one potential other pro card. You know, if you want to have like your Visa, your Mastercard, and the American Express, or in this case Australian Express, maybe we do that next year. But so yeah, you win Natural Olympia, and Joey Cantlin, big shout out by the way, a fantastic coach, a great guy. Honestly, just someone I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and you could say he's probably one of the best coaches in this region of the world. For the Americans, I would say he's like he's the down under Cliff Wilson. If you look at his numbers of successes and the amount of competitors who he has brought to the stage successfully. How long have you been working with Joey?
This is my first season with Joey, actually.
Uh-huh.
So grateful to have met him. So he was actually working with my partner, Mark, for a season. Well, actually, my partner was working with him for 3 years or so. But yeah, that's kind of how I met Joey. And I saw how he worked with Mark and went, I can see myself really getting a lot out of working with Joey. And I love working with different coaches. I've had, a few different coaches over the years, and I find it so great because you learn so much from people. And I will never, ever be someone here I would never say that I know enough. Like, I always love learning from other people and working with different coaches and things like that. So, I'm just so blessed to have started working with Joey. He taught me a lot about my body that I didn't know. We were able to really nut out what was going to be a great approach for me. I have to say, it was the best. I've always just kind of struggled with stomach sensitivities and things. And so on show day food and the protocols around show day have always kind of been a struggle for me. I feel like we really nailed that. So he's a bit of a wizard, Joey.
No, yeah. And from the times I've seen you leading up into shows, obviously, social media pictures aren't the same as being there in person, but having seen you in person, peaking very consistently from what I've seen and looking like you can't ask for much more than looking your best or at least equal to your best on game day. That is a huge win when anxiety is necessarily its highest on show day. Typically, sometimes you're traveling and not getting great sleep, you're jet lagged. And you're like at the Australia show, probably the only gripe I would have had was that the tanning was done kind of at the show, half outside, half inside. And it was a really good dark color, but it didn't fully dry. And we kind of just had to stand around and get my legs fatigued and kind of hover over seats and things like that. So it was really good color, but especially if you're in multiple divisions, like you and I were. I competed in the Masters and then I did the Open and then I had to wait around for the overall. It was kind of hard to babysit that, all day long. So that's kind of what you're dealing with on game day. It's not like just going to do a photo shoot on the day after your refeed, which would be nice for 30 minutes. So yeah, but anyway, I won't belabor that point, but it is a very impressive thing that you and Joey were able to pull off of multiple times getting on stage, looking your best and peaking, especially if, you've historically dealt with GI insensitivities that have made that more challenging.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I couldn't be happier. With that. So, yeah.
And the grand finale. So you're going into Worlds coming off a hot streak, but this is technically your WNBF Pro debut, right?
Yeah, that's right. Which wasn't planned. None of this was planned. So I think for me, how I was feeling, I guess, a little bit mentally at this point, I had just in my mind, I kind of just accomplished basically the biggest goal of the season. So for me, WNBF Worlds, even though I was super excited for this, it was kind of like I had no expectations.
Right.
I was going into this for experience. I was going into this for, obviously how incredible to stand on that stage. Like you kind of mentioned earlier, I felt like I had already won. I was going there, standing on a stage full of amazing women, and even standing backstage with them and pumping up with them and looking around being so inspired by all of these women. Like, it was absolutely incredible. Like, the standard of athlete was phenomenal, like mind blowing. So yeah, I was already so happy with everything, and it was just going to be whatever it was going to be. However, yeah, to my surprise, I actually won.
Yeah.
Which was a major cherry on top, I suppose you could say.
Absolutely. And the fit body class was very competitive. That was a very impressive class. This was the most competitive WNBF Worlds that I have been to. I've been to 2014 coaching, 2019 coaching, and 2021 coaching. And then this is my first time actually competing. And we did some fact checking last minute because I wasn't sure on this, and I really
the interns were busy at work.
Correct. They were appropriately whipped and we were appropriately coffeed, and no one was paid. Outside of the valuable experience they're getting doing work that I could easily do on my own. Hashtag interns. Look us up if you're interested in getting a job. I know I just made it sound great here at Iron Culture. But every single pro category winner was a first-time world champion. So we had, for those who have already watched our episode with Dirk Emmerich, that was his pro debut, his pro worlds debut, I should say. So it's the first. So he's the new lightweight champ. Benjamin Schuster, he won the middleweights in his pro debut. The heavyweight champ and eventual overall, Brian DaCosta, same thing. Chris Elkins got dethroned in the men's physique. I believe it was a first-time win for the bikini competitor. That was the last little bit of research I needed to check. Obviously, you at your pro debut are winning fit body. There was a changing of the guard in figure. And yeah, and I think in Masters, this was only the third year or so they had it. And that was big. That was 14 in the men's bodybuilding Masters class, at least. So I could be wrong, but at the very least, the vast majority of the world champions in the pro category at WNBF Worlds were new. And that is not, you don't typically see dynasties like you do in, say, like the Olympia in the mid-2000s, like 8-time Mr. Olympia, Ronnie Coleman, 8-time Mr. Olympia, Lee Haney, Jay Cutler has a stint. It's changed a little bit now in the modern era, but natural bodybuilding was maybe close to that. Like Bada was a 2-time bodybuilding world champion. There were a number of people who came back and were competing who had won world championships previously. But winning 2-3 times, especially in the mid-2000s, I think was relatively common. Your Jim Cordovas, your Brian Whitakers, your Lisa Lums, your Katie Wayman-Whites on the women's side as well. To see just an entire changing of the guard and some very, very dominant WNBF world champions in the past place second or even lower in some cases. I think Chris Elkins, and again, I'm not throwing shade here, it's just a very competitive class. I think he placed fourth in the in his class. Was really cool to see, and the numbers were huge. The WNBF Worlds, it's harder to get into. It's at the very end of the year. You have to have done a pro show or have won your pro card that year to compete in the pro division. And then in the amateurs, you're typically needing to place very high in your country or in the U.S. In the top 3 out of larger classes, or top 2 or win smaller classes. So anyway, the caliber of athlete at WNBF Worlds is pretty high, even if the numbers and the number of days aren't quite as big as, say, like the Natural Olympia, which is, I mean, honestly, Becky, I've been to Natural Olympias before, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, or it'd be cool to hear your experience because I wasn't there this year. But the historical experience I've had is that sometimes a Natural Olympia is bigger in terms of competitors, and it's competitive on a similar level for that reason. But there are fewer, let's say there's fewer competitors at Worlds, but there are a higher average caliber. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Yeah, I guess I could say that. Yeah, the quality of athletes at Worlds was pretty insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to come in and win the fit body title, just straight out the gates, and that was the only division you competed in, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that was a hard decision because I had to choose between fit body and figure. Right. However, I had been doing quite well in figure along the way, and I thought, why not finish with fit body?
I love it. And you did something which I think, again, the interns hopefully haven't let me down, that I don't think anyone has done before, which is to win the Natural Olympia title in figure and then win WNBF Worlds in the same year, the Fit Body title. And also to do that in your rookie season, at least as a WNBF pro, is very, very impressive. And that is one of the reasons why I reached out to you, as well as Natalie, as well as Dirk, because they're all doing these monumental things. You know, Dirk was the only person to ever won the Bantam Amateur World title. And then in his rookie season, I think he might be the only person who's ever won the WNBF Lightweight World title. And you doing what you did, and obviously Natalie winning every show on the planet in the bodybuilding division, it was pretty impressive as well. I've got a question for you. So you've got some love for Fit Body because it maintains that elegance, maintains that symmetry, has that femininity as you spoke to it. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I'm hearing. But you've got also that muscular element. You got the muscular poses. Figure has all that, but not the muscular poses, but emphasizes symmetry even more. You're in love with both. You're having a tough time deciding which way you want to go. Would you ever do pure bodybuilding?
Yes, I have. I have definitely thought about it.
Oh.
Yeah. I could potentially next time I am back, that might be what I look into doing. Yeah.
I love it. Because this is a hot take. And some people who really kind of focus on unique divisions and the subtleties between them, especially in some of these organizations with like 500 different divisions, may disagree. But I feel, especially for natural bodybuilders, and especially at a very high level, and in where conditioning is rewarded in certain classes, personally, I feel like, at least in the WNBF, the person who wins figure, fit body, and bodybuilding, if they have their posing equally good in all three, in many cases, could jump into any one of those they want and do very well. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I do actually agree with that. A lot of it, I guess, does have a lot to do with the posing and how you pose as to how you're showing off your physique. And, I mean, I guess that's where posing is so important, because it can either make you shine or really let you down. So, yeah.
And that's not to say there's no body type differences. Obviously, like if we were to talk about men's physique and you just have really poor attachments in your legs and just poor leg development, or like an injury, and, in fact, I met at the Washington. There was a gentleman who had I think a motorcycle injury to where he had severe atrophy in one leg, and he did the bodybuilding and the physique division. He's like, well, I typically choose physique because, for one, I have atrophy in that leg, but I also can't spike that calf or do some of the poses at all. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But I think outside of bikini and outside of men's physique, and a lot of in the natural realm, I think it really primarily does come down to posing differently in most cases. So it'd be really interesting to see where you did in bodybuilding, because just some of your pictures that you took with like Natalie or Edna, I'm like, wow, that would be a sick battle to see. Even though there are different categories, I think you would be just as competitive, but in different, unique ways.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I am quite blessed in the fact that I've got a good stature for bodybuilding. Like, I'm quite small, but I'm very broad. I've got short limbs, big muscle bellies. So I think, I'm blessed in the fact that I can kind of cross between categories, which is exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. One thing I will say is that for very tall women, they're probably going to do better in, say, figure than some of the other categories. And it is challenging when you jump into those. Like a classic example is Chrissy Zimjewski, for those who know. She is, I want to say she actually started in bodybuilding back in the day, and she's a known hallmark of getting very, very, very lean. I actually had the pleasure of teaching with her back at Bryan University early in my fitness career. We both were instructors for personal trainers in a associate's degree program in Sacramento. And then when she made the switch over to figure, she became, pro champion. So I think that's one example where that's probably a little different. I think height can impact things a bit. It's very difficult to be super, super tall and good in the more muscular divisions, just because of the kind of the way the posing is rewarded, for sure. So anyway, it'd be really, really cool to see what your future looks like in the sport, since you seem to be competitive across any division you try, at least at this stage.
Yes, yeah. I'm pretty excited for the future, that's for sure.
So let's talk about that a little bit. How is your recovery going? And then what is on the landscape of the horizon for you moving into the subsequent years?
hmm Well, I mean, I've been flat out since coming back to Australia. I'm just going to say that. So I haven't had a lot of time to really think too much about it. However, what I do know is I will be taking some time off. Oh, I wouldn't say time off. I'll be working hard for a couple of years until I decide what I want to do next. Potentially bodybuilding, like I mentioned. But so far, recovery is going, I'd say probably the best it's ever been for me. Yeah, I wouldn't say, like, I wear my heart on my sleeve. So I'm going to be honest and say that the post-comp reverse recovery, whatever you want to call it, is definitely a difficult time for me, mentally, physically. I do struggle with it. However, it's definitely the best I've had. So that's a positive.
That is a huge positive. And I think, you know, I love that you're wearing your heart on your sleeve on this topic, because this is something that is true for the majority of competitors. And let's see, how would I phrase it as someone who's been coaching for a while and has been competing for a while? Eventually, you want to get to the point where it's not as hard as the deepest dark phase of prep. I think early in people's careers, sometimes it could actually be worse when you don't have the habits in place, the mentality, or the ability to transition your mindset of seeing like, okay, getting less lean is a good thing right now. You know, embracing looking worse but feeling better is hard to do. And if you can't embrace it, then you actually look worse. And because of that, you feel worse because you you know, and it's like being pulled in two different directions at the same time. And it can be very much this feeling of whiplash where you know that you need to be doing something, but you've been so laser focused as an athlete on achieving a certain look that now is actually counterproductive to your goals. And I think that kind of empty nest post-contest blues immediate, like you get off stage and there's literally no reason to look like you do anymore. But then it's hard to appreciate what you've accomplished because you've been so driven forward and you want to look back and you're looking at contest photos and you look in the mirror and you hate yourself. It can be quite the challenge. And to say that it's gotten better and this is the best time it's happened, I think is a good sign, because that is one of the things that is I would say a threat to longevity in the sport if you don't know how to improve that transition and make that is smooth enough so that it's worth it.
Totally agree with you. And I think it takes a lot of growth and personal development to kind of get to that point where you're okay with this process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Beccy, you mentioned that this season, specifically, your transition from competition to off-season went smoother than it has in the past. Do you think there's any specific thing that kind of set you up for such a successful transition compared to prior years?
Yeah, definitely. I guess, as I mentioned earlier, it's a little bit of personal development and growth. So just doing it a lot of times and learning from it. So yeah, there's that. But also I think the biggest thing is the support network that I have. So having an amazing coach like Joey, someone who you can kind of lean on and ask questions, and he's always there when you're not feeling the best. And I also have like a great, I guess, personal network. So my partner, he's so supportive and he's like really, really great listener. So that's always handy. I've got some amazing friends, and just like Brad Clark, as I mentioned earlier, he's also been supporting me through the entire prep. He's actually been doing a little bit of personal training with me, so pushing me in the gym along this journey. So yeah, I've just got a lot of people around me that have been so supportive. And like I said, I wear my heart on my sleeve. So I'm never shy to say to people like, hey, I'm struggling. And I think that's huge. If you're struggling, I think trying to bottle it up or trying to get through that alone is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. As a coach, and this is something Berto's talked about, like the typical physique athlete is they go through a phase where they expect things to be hard. They see their skill set as I can do hard things. I can push through hard things almost as an identity. And therefore, when they work with a coach, they are constantly going like, hey, I can do more. I can do more. And they don't think it's almost relevant to bring up when it's really hard because they expect that. And the shift when someone is, at least mentally, in my opinion, ready to be a pro and compete like in a sustainable way and stick with the sport long term, is when they're aware of when they're approaching their own limits and they respect the fact that they have them, but they also have that, abundance, self-growth, self-efficacy to say like, I might be able to expand on these, or these aren't necessarily my limitations every day, but right now I'm butting up against my limit, and my coach needs to know that so we can make an adjustment rather than me crumbling or making an error or binging or getting burnt out or pulling out or digging a deficit of fatigue that's going to take us weeks to climb out of, and potentially the timing of that not being so I can look my best on stage. So yeah, just to echo what you're saying, I fully agree. And for early stage competitive bodybuilders with kind of that outwork mentality, that is a mindset shift, but it's an incredibly important mindset shift. And I think personally, champions are not so enamored with the work they have to do to get an outcome. They become a little more ruthless in like, what do I need to do to get the outcome? I don't care about how it's perceived or whether you worked harder than me or I think I worked harder than myself last time. I'm trying to get the best outcome for myself, and I'm results oriented. And I think that is a shift that, you're moving towards it being a little more sport-like than this kind of like therapeutic process of expressing yourself, which it can still be. But when it comes to being at your best on stage, I think you benefit from that perspective.
Yeah.
Trex, what do you think?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. I mean, having that, I really appreciate that you highlighted how important it is to have that social support, that circle, because I think it's such a massive advantage to have that, and something that I think competitors actually should consider proactively putting in place, if possible, before they, set out on a really big season with multiple shows and stuff. I think it actually makes sense to kind of plan out, like, when I'm struggling, who can I lean on? And I think that can be a really illuminating experience. Sometimes you find out, whoa, people I thought I could lean on, maybe I can't lean on them. But of course, there's some give and take there. If you're leaning and leaning and leaning, then, a good friend or partner will say, hey, you don't seem to be doing so well. Maybe this isn't for you, So it's a little give and take. You don't want to, terrorize everyone around you, but you also want to make sure that you're taking those steps to kind of build that that little bit of support that you're likely going to need. I think it's so valuable to kind of remind people that when you're struggling in prep, you absolutely should let people know, because it can go a really long way. Because I've had experiences in prep where I don't want to necessarily. I mean, I don't really hide how I'm feeling very well, so people I think knew. But you get super lethargic. Maybe you're a little bit crankier more often. It's if nothing else, it's good to contextualize like, hey, every now and then I'm going to have a morning where I'm just I might need a little bit of space. I might be struggling a little bit. And if you tell people that, it's usually like, hey, it's not you, it's me. Like I'm having a rough day today, and usually that's just better for everybody involved. But ultimately, Beccy, your response, I think. On top of all that stuff, just mentioning the growth, and you didn't use this term, but it kind of came through your answer. But I think just experience, Helms, I think we've talked about this before somewhere, but the post-competition period is strange. It is a weird experience, and it might sound very, very strange to someone who's not been there. But if you think about what contest prep is and what it looks like, if you're not careful, you might get into a habit, a routine, where every day you wake up, you check your weight on the scale, maybe you take a look in the mirror, and if you look leaner and the scale's lower during prep, you'd say, oh, cool, we're making strides. This is going to be a good day, right? And you get that kind of positive, you get a nice little pep in your step. But the opposite is also true if you're not careful. And I actually, if I were coaching someone through a prep, I would very strongly counsel them to not play that game where a happy check-in sets you up for a good day when you step on the scale in the morning. But then what does a higher than expected weight do? It tanks your day from the moment you woke up. So I would tell people, as much as tell people to enjoy small wins, let's not necessarily pin our hopes and dreams for the day on that thing that occurs right when we wake up. But all of that is to say, you get in this routine if you're not careful and you're not planning and you're not experienced, where every morning you step on the scale and make that decision. Am I going to be happy today or kind of bummed out? And so if you're doing a successful prep, more days than not, you're going to say, okay, I'm kind of happy. Things are moving the right direction. And then after a competition, boom, like if you went out after the competition, had a big meal, you're like, whoa, there's 3 pounds. And then it's a consistent, the metric that has been determining if you're having a good morning or a bad morning, all of a sudden is almost always bad, right? If you don't really kind of fix your mindset on, what are we really doing here? So I think the more experienced you are, the more you can kind of be at peace with that, and not just at peace with it, but understanding I'm not just okay with how this is going. This is how it should be going. This is how it's supposed to go. And so I think between the support and the experience, you kind of put yourself in a position where, you can ride that storm in the first few weeks, maybe the first couple months where things otherwise would be a little bit jarring and a little bit stressful.
Yeah, definitely. I love the way that you just explained all of that, because it's so true how the number on the scale can really change your entire day, your energy, your mindset. Yeah. So
yeah, and I would also encourage people, if you've got that morning routine and hey, you're prepping, you should keep an eye on your body weight in most cases. You should keep an eye on your physique, certainly. I actually encourage people, look at your physique before you check the weight. If you're going to be doing that morning check-in, because once you see the weight, it's going to your eyes are useless at that point. Your eyes are gone. Your brain takes over. If you end up weighing in 1.5 pounds higher than you thought, you're going to look in the mirror and say, "Oh my God, look at these love handles!" Right? It just once you look at the number on the scale, you ruined it. You cannot objectively do a physique check after that.
I agree.
So recovery is going better than it has before. Still a challenge. How long would you say you have before you would state that you're in the off season rather than the recovery phase?
Oh, that's a hard one. It is really hard to kind of judge that. I guess it'll be when my body is ready. So like currently I know that I'm still recovering. Like
Yep.
I know that my hormones are out of whack. I know that, my fatigue is still there slightly. Yeah, so energy is not as high. Like there's all of these factors that I think that's kind of how I determine whether I'm still recovering or, yeah, I'm in off season. So my strength is definitely not back yet. Like normally when I would say that I'm fully recovered, I would have like regular menstrual cycle. I would have high energy. Yeah, like, and I think that's when I would say, yeah, I'm recovered. I'm in off season. I can start pushing really hard now. But yeah, at the moment, I think I'm definitely still recovering, and it's going to take some time, and that's okay.
And I'm in the same boat, and it's a tough thing. It's for me, I would say I'm probably 90%, but I find there's a funny thing where you forget what 100% felt like during the recovery phase. So you're like, oh yeah, I'm back, and then you get back more, and you're like, okay, by definition, I wasn't fully back then, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I had my first wake up. I actually told Beccy before we started recording that at a time that did not start with 5 a.m. It wasn't 5 something. It was 6 something. And I was like, okay, sleep PR, we're doing all right. Now, am I looking at my wife the same way that I did a year ago? Not every morning, but more often than not. Am I interested in making sure that I get the last grain of quinoa out of my salads? Probably still, but at least the sleep is there, guys. So I think we're well on our way, but it does take time. It absolutely takes time.
Definitely.
And it's such a gradual thing. It's kind of like if you have a lingering cold or some kind of lingering illness, and then like one day you notice, oh, I'm totally fine. And you're like, when did that happen? Was it like Tuesday? Was it? And it's like, you have that like steep recovery period. And then you get to like 80% recovered. And then the last 20%, it's so gradual. All of a sudden you're like, I think I might be in like just the off season now. Like, I think I'm back, but it can kind of sneak up on you. And what a lovely thing to sneak up on you when you notice, wow, I feel great.
Yes, definitely.
Like, yeah, I'm actually annoyed by having to eat this Greek yogurt tonight. That's when I know I'm back, when I'm not like, man, this equal flavored plain Greek yogurt, so yeah.
That's funny. Very true.
Awesome. Well, Beccy, I've asked a lot of questions. Trex has too, but one thing I want to open the floor up to is, your experience is your own. And like you said, one of the most valuable things you get out of competing is when you impact and inspire others. So what things have we not asked that you think are valuable lessons or things you want to leave people with, or just to flesh out your story before we close this out? And feel free to go back to your history, to the future, wherever you want. The floor is yours.
I could talk for hours about bodybuilding and about, my...
So can we.
about, how I got here and all of that. I think, I guess something that I would like to say to people is ignore the noise. Do what you love, and really do it for the right reasons. Do it for you. Don't do it for anyone else. Get a good support network around you, because that's going to see you through. And it's okay if it's not for you. It's not for everyone. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say there.
No, I love that. I will. I often paraphrase or directly quote my friend, colleague, and former client, Ace Baldwin, who's WNBF pro, now retired. He said at one of our seminars, natural bodybuilding isn't just not for everyone, it's for almost no one, which I always found hilarious. And I think there's probably a bit of truth to that. And as the sport grows, which is awesome for us who love it and are involved with it, I think it's just something to remember. There's a lot of ways to express yourself in this wacky, wide world of fitness, and it absolutely does not have to be in competitive bodybuilding. So, and you can take inspiration from awesome champs like Beccy here and not necessarily have that mean that you also need to compete in bodybuilding. So I just want to say thank you for that, Beccy. Thank you for your time. Congratulations on an epic season, being both Miss Natural Olympia in figure and the WNBF Pro World Champion in fit body, and doing that in your pro debut as a WNBF pro is pretty damn impressive. And like I said, one of the other historic performances that we're seeing as natural bodybuilding is on the rise. So if people want to follow along, if they want to see more of you and be inspired by you, what's the best place they can do that to follow you?
Probably my Instagram, so Beccy Pateman. Same with my Facebook, so nice and simple, Beccy Pateman.
Love it. Eric, anything you want to touch on before we close this one out?
No, I just want to congratulate Beccy again on all of your success, and thank you for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. And look, I'm still overwhelmed with everything that has happened. So it still sounds crazy to hear it. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to you recovering more, digesting the accomplishments you've had, and hopefully digesting food better. That's another one of those aspects of recovery that tends to have a long, slow arc. Pun intended? I don't know. Was there a pun there? It sounds loosely pun-like. But I also want to say that thank you to all the listeners for listening to another episode of Iron Culture. There's some things you can do if you appreciate episodes like this or any episode of Iron Culture. That's click that thumbs up, give us a like. If you want to hear more, definitely subscribe. And heck, if you really want to go above and beyond, you can leave a rating and a review. Most of the time, people are leaving 5-star reviews. That's not me telling you what to do. It's just saying that's what most people who are intelligent, smart, well-liked are doing. So if you want to be those things, you can decide what type of review you want to leave. So thank you again. This has been another episode of Iron Culture. You can catch us every single insert date here, and we'll see you in the next episode.